This is our second talk in the Rooted in Community, the Power of Trees series. We're honored to have Ellen Lemay here speak about Miyawaki microforests. Our second presentation had to be postponed, so it was rescheduled for Wednesday, April 29th, and that will be Planet Wild Tree Workshop, What You Can Do, and that's going to be by Bram Gunther, and it's essentially how to build microforest in your own yard. So it's a residential, smaller scale. Before we begin and I introduce Mary Ellen, I just wanted to read a chapter from The Walkable City by Jeff Speck. Not a chapter, a paragraph. So he says, the educational and crime data is astounding. One University of Illinois study of more than 50,000 Washington State middle schoolers found that the more tree cover around a school, the better its standardized test scores in both math and reading. This study controlled for 17 other factors, including neighborhood demographics. Remarkably, what mattered was tree cover close to the school. Neither neighborhood greenery nor schoolyard grass had a similar impact. Even if the larger neighborhood was leafy, students were no better off if the schoolyard wasn't. As your child's school district struggles to improve its test scores, how much is it investing in trees? So that's very apropos in Stamford. So we would like to welcome Mary Ellen Lemay. She's the Conservation Director for the Aspetuck Land Trust, providing outreach, education, and engagement to encourage people to improve biodiversity on their land by enhancing native habitat and restoring nature-based systems. Mel's recent work includes designing and installing climate-smart projects in the city of Bridgeport, including the planting of 8 Miyawaki forests at schools and Seaside Park, as well as waterside buffers along river and coastal properties in the city. Her 20 years of conservation work includes her role as the Conservation Commission Chair for the town of Trumbull, co-founder of the Pollinator Pathway, Connecticut Deep Master Wildlife Conservationist, member of the Connecticut Deep Native Plant Working Group. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Fairfield University, a Master's in Business Administration from Fordham University, and a Master's in Environmental Management from the Yale School of the Environment. So it's my pleasure to welcome Mary Ellen. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. So my husband said every time you get a new master's degree, your salary goes down. Why is that? Because I'm trying something new. But thank you for inviting me here today. This Discovery Center is just beautiful. I lived in Stamford in the late 80s, and this was not here then. And I love the work that you've done on the Mill River. We have a couple of old industrial rivers up in Bridgeport that I'd love to come here and use this as a model for restoring those rivers. So great job on the Mill River here. And thank you for inviting me here to talk about what is my favorite subject, is Miyawaki forests, or microforests, or tiny forests, or in Scotland they call them wee forests. And this just kind of emerged for us at Aspetuck as a project that has kind of taken a life of its own. So I'm going to share with you just a brief overview of what the Land Trust does, how this came about, how I first saw these Miyawaki forests. I'm going to do a little overview on how they were discovered, what they are, and then go a deeper dive into the 8 schools, not all 8, but into why we decided to do these at the schools. And then at the end, I'm going to give you some new information about the biggest Miyawaki that in the Northeast that we just put in Seaside Park. It's 12,000 square feet. And Dave Anderson is here from New England Wetland Plants in Massachusetts. We got them all from him. They came in a couple of trucks, and they're just doing well. We joked because we planted that forest, when you see the picture, we planted it in this past November, so everything was dormant. So all the trees came off the trucks as sticks, and then we planted them. We didn't water them because we didn't want to wake them up. And I was just there today, and I just can't wait for them to wake up and realize they're at the beach. Like they were born in Massachusetts, and now they're going to wake up at the beach in Seaside Park. So this is what the Aspetuck Land Trust, what our mission is, to protect land forever and connect people to the natural world. So it's not just conserving land, that is a big part of what we do. It's a big part of what most land trusts do, but connecting people to the natural world we decided was going to be one of our greatest outreach projects. Land protection and stewardship of our preserves. We have 45 preserves, and the education and engagement is what I do. The Aspetuck Land Trust used to be a 4-town land trust. Now we're 7, and we just picked up Norwalk. So Norwalk is under our umbrella now. The Norwalk Land Trust has merged with the Aspetuck Land Trust. And we're finding that in this time, when you merge into a regional land trust, you get a lot more capacity to do work and to get grants and to get major donors. We have major donors now who want to see this regional large-scale protection of land, but they also want to see these small projects that we're doing in the cities, because that is Fairfield County, you know, high population, scattered with cities, and it's not just about the land that we protected, it's the land that we all live in, which is our homes, our schools, and what we can do there. We have 14 staff people and 20 board members. When I started 7 years ago, there were only 4 staff people. So we're full-time. And that, too, makes a very big difference for land trusts, because most land trusts are volunteer-based. And there's just so much that you can do as a group of volunteers. But when you have staff, even if you have part-time staff, it makes a huge difference, because somebody can invest a lot more time into the work. So our initiative, I don't know if you can see this from back there, but Building Bridges is our initiative for connecting to the urban center, specifically Bridgeport. Now that we have Norwalk, that's considered part of our Building Bridges work. So we want to focus on creating environmental equity for urban spaces and meet people where they live. Understand the differences that people have as individuals, what their current circumstances are, their experiences, their beliefs and needs, without judging where they live, without judging who they are or what they understand about nature. So we find out where they are, and then we bring them into our environment. That's step 1. Focusing on mental health, and this is just what Melanie said before. 70% of respondents to a Mental Health America Connection survey reported wishing they had more time outdoors, ideally in nature, away from their neighborhoods. So we decided, okay, let's bring the people from Bridgeport and the students to our preserves. Come up to our preserves. We'll do hikes. We do nighttime bird watches. Those are saw-whet owls that we tag. And it just has been such a endearing opportunity for people to come and experience nature first time in our preserves. But we decided that's not enough. And again, bringing nature back to their schools and their landscapes is key. How are we going to do that? How are we going to bring our forests to the schools? How are we going to bring our forests to Bridgeport? And that was the start of the Miyawaki Forest Project, bringing these tiny forests. And actually, our goal is to have them ultimately part of our forests by collecting acorns and propagating our oaks and our swamp white oaks and bringing them to Bridgeport in this ecoregion, keeping the ecoregion pure and bringing them from our forests into Bridgeport. That's how we did it. So this is the discovery. This is, they say that a picture can be worth 1,000 words. Well, this picture was from the Environmental Landscape Alliance newsletter in 2021. And I happened to see this. And I thought, what is that? I've never seen anything like it. Look at the little people. What is this big circle? And you can't plant things that closely. That doesn't make any sense. So it caught my attention, and I began to look into this Miyawaki forest. This one is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's the first one that was built in the Northeast, or planted, I should say, in the Northeast. And I believe that this is a really exciting forestry concept that just turns everything upside down for us in terms of our traditional ways of planting. You know, we always had to space things out a couple of feet. This just blows it right out of the water, and I can show you why this method was developed. So this book, there's actually two books that have been written on mini forests. Hannah Lewis did a talk, a lunch and learn talk for us at the end of last year. I encourage you to get this book. It's available everywhere. Hannah does a wonderful job looking at the movement across the planet of these Miyawaki forests, and started in Japan in the late 1970s into 1980. So it's been out there. It's only now coming to the United States. And, you know, in my years at Yale Forestry, we never talked about this Miyawaki forest or this kind of methodology for growing trees. It was, you know, forest restoration, but the goal is different. The goal for that was timber, or you say timber, lumber. It's growing them spaced as far apart as you can, so you get the trunk, so you get the carbon, so you get the nice slices of board. That's really all the forest restoration was about. And then when they replanted, they did, you know, monoculture. So this is not about that. This is about restoring the landscape, healing the landscape, and bringing biodiversity back. Not only in the trees that you put in there, but nature that responds to it. So this single photo really prompted me into diving a bit more into this method. So I learned about Akira Miyawaki, who sadly just died in 2021. So he had this amazing method, was a tool to turn us from degraders of the landscape into stewards of the landscape, helping us to repair what is disconnected and restore our connection to the systems that we're part of. This is about planting systems, not about planting individual trees. It's about bringing a system back that was meant to always be together. So by restoring these ecosystems, we're solving a multitude of problems that we are experiencing today in the face of climate change. So this is one of the first Miyawakis that was planted over 50 years ago at Nippon Steel in Japan. And so you can see that these are industrial sites. They were designed for industrial sites. And Dr. Miyawaki was brought in as a consultant by Nippon Steel to replant the forests on their degraded landscape. So this one was planted. It is 50 years old, and it is a dense, high-functioning ecosystem. And he was also called in by other companies in Japan, like Toyota. And this was during the 80s, early 80s, and that was a time of, I don't know, those of you who were in business at that time, there was continuous quality improvement, right? So you would change, you'd see what worked, and then if it didn't work, you would change things, and it was constantly moving. And this is why Toyota did so well, because at that point, that was like the birth of Toyota. So they were pretty cutting edge when it came to their landscape in Japan as well, and bringing somebody like Dr. Miyawaki in. So this is at the Tokyo Power Company, and see how close they are. They're starting in the 80s. These were planted very closely. Naturally amended soil quickly restores the native tree canopy. These are forests, not plantations, not rows of trees. They're mixed, diverse species planted randomly across the landscape. So he started out with 1 plant per square meter, and so a meter is roughly like 3 feet, and then he increased this to 3 plants a square meter. So that's 1 plant every square foot. So for basically, it's right on top of each other. So these are some great pictures everybody loves, before and after pictures, at Yokohama National University in Japan. And I looked at this one, I thought, that is a perfect example of what we would see as a riparian buffer along the edges of rivers, right? Pretty steep. And they held the grade and then planted really densely. And he created what he liked to call a forest wall. So they might be 10 feet wide, might be 15 feet wide, and hundreds of feet long. And it creates a dense wall. They don't have to be extremely wide. And for us to look at our rivers in here, in Norwalk, in Bridgeport, if we can get 10 feet back, that would be incredible. If we could get 100 feet back from the river, which is the setback in some towns, 100 feet back from the edge of the water, imagine what we could do with the riverside. And the health of the river would improve. The fish, the birds, I mean, it's almost like you just like Doug Tallamy said, the plants are the critical step one. They're the bottom of the Jenga game, then the insects come, and then the birds come before you have, and then the whole food chain responds. And that's what we're doing by planting just these little small trees. This one in India, this is 1 year. And when I first saw this, I said, there's no way that could work. And now that I've planted 8 of them, yes, they grow that fast. It's shocking. And in Pakistan also. Of course, these are different climates all over the world, but they're planting the natives from that area. It's just not a cookie cutter or a recipe that they apply to different, it's the natives from that location. And that's part of the analysis of that site. The soil analysis that's done, and then you do a baseline to see what natives are in that area. And then you enhance it. And we look at our landscape from 150 years ago. There were plants that were here then that aren't here now. That's who we need to bring back. And my challenge for folks like Dave Anderson here is help us to propagate. He can propagate these baby trees. And if you ever went to his nursery up in Massachusetts, it's just amazing. Greenhouses of just little baby trees, thousands of them. And that's the volume that we're talking about that we put into these Miyawakis, thousands of trees. Here's another one in Beirut, Lebanon. This is a 5-year Miyawaki forest. And then in Thailand. And it's incredible, and I love these aerial shots, these drone pictures. And I have a couple. One of our Aspetuck members has a drone. So he was there every day with us for the planting of our big Miyawaki. Just came out with a video today that we put on Facebook. It's 2 minutes long. I was just going to try and figure out how to embed it into my talk, but I didn't want to mess everything up. So you'll have to go on Facebook to see the video. But what we're trying to do here with these Miyawaki forests is really harness the power of just photosynthesis, of life, of nature, fostering a living soil underneath, photosynthesis on top, and getting the root systems to grow and intertwine. And I don't know if anyone has read the mother tree, about how these trees really communicate with each other underground. And we went from a typical forestry mindset, which is like they're going to compete. They're going to compete, and you need to keep them kind of away from each other. But they collaborate. They cooperate underground. And we saw it in our forests in the schools. They got through 2 droughts without being watered. Everything else around them, the lawns were brown, and the forest was green. And it was as if they helped each other through. Some of them did not do too well, but then they came back in September, October. It was really quite amazing to watch this. So this is the basic method. So the beauty of these small pocket forests is they allow us to create this mosaic of small landscapes that are footholds for biodiversity. They combat environmental justice challenges in the urban and industrial communities where you really have maybe a limited space. And this is why they fit so well in there. And the rapid growth that we see comes, of course, from 2 billion-year-old process called photosynthesis, converting sunlight and energy into the forms that we need to create light. The competition for sunlight creates rapid growth and the layers of the forest. They double and triple in size from saplings in the forest. So they grow up because they're so close to each other, but they are connecting underground and they're helping each other. So what we're doing is creating, as someone said to me, you're stacking the deck in favor of a fast-growing forest. And I said, we are, because forests emerge in succession. So if you left the grass area, it would take a long time before it then became, more herbaceous, and then maybe some shrubs would show up a couple of years later. But most of the time we'd have invasives here, right? We know that when we leave open space, invasives come. But here we're doing all the successional levels of forests at the same time. So I'm planting canopy trees, like oaks, young oaks, this big, right next to birch and sassafras and tupelo and hazelnut and all the shrub layer, the upper canopy layer, the mid layer, and the herbaceous layer, all planted at the same time on the same day. We're cramming them in right next to each other. They want to be together. They're supposed to be together. Maybe initially not at the same time, but we don't have 200 years to wait for a traditional forest. And that's how long it would take normally. With this method, within 20 years, you'll have a young forest. And we've seen it in 2 years. The birch and a lot of the trees are over our heads. They started out down here, in 2 years they're up here. It's almost like they feed on each other. And they support each other. And the soil itself that we use it's just critical we don't remove soil from a location. So even if it's really bad soil, we do a soil analysis to see what's missing. But most of the time, and even in Bridgeport, we have just added compost. And we actually have a great program in Bridgeport, in the Park City compost, where they take the food scraps from the city and they make the most beautiful compost. So this way, talk about closing the loop. We get the food scraps from Bridgeport, making them into this beautiful compost, and then we take the compost, we put it into the land, and then we don't till the land. What we use are augers. So there's big augers for the bigger trees, and then for the herbaceous, we use small ones. So you're just going in, you're making a hole, and you're mixing the compost in that hole. There's something called biochar, which we haven't used yet, but that is a really good additive to the hole as well. It can hold water, and it's a natural, it's like charcoal really, and that is known to be a really good additive to the soil for the Miyawakis. So you do the soil analysis, you do the planting just like that, randomly now, but you have to understand that if you have, let's say it's 100 square feet, so 10 by 10, in that area you're going to have 2 canopy trees, so let's say 2 oaks. You're not going to put them next to each other. You're going to spread them out, but then all the rest of the lower canopy trees and the shrubs are going to be randomly put around in there. What we're fiding is sometimes things like inkberry did not do well. It didn't do well, and clethra, because they like a little wetter. So they probably would have been good to put the biochar in. But if they were planted inside the forest, they did great. If they were on the edge, they did not like it, because then they had the heat and they were kind of on their own. It's like if you took a clethra and put it out in the middle of the field, that would not be a happy clethra. But when it's in here with all of its peeps, it's like, okay, I need a little shade. And the oaks will get shade from the amelanchier that now grows really fast. And it's so much fun to watch, because as it grows, it's dense, and it just feels good to walk through the forest. And I made sure that most of the bigger ones at the schools all had paths through them so that you can get in there and actually feel the shade, and you can hear the, the birds that are in there. So, and that's kind of what this picture shows. As it grows, the canopy does lift up. It does lift up, and you'll be able to kind of see through it. But the first couple of years, it's dense, and you can't see through it. But then you have an opportunity, if you have paths, for people to walk in there and be in this forest, in this natural, dense forest. So this is the comparison of what a Miyawaki method, in terms of the succession we talked about, natural succession of a forest versus Miyawaki. So at the top is what a natural succession is. That's a 200-year period for forests to grow. 0 to 5, you get your annual plants. 0 to 15, herbs, grasses, forbs. 10 to 40 years, you'll maybe get some shrubs. 20 to 100 years, some shade intolerant pioneer trees like our birch. And then 100, 200 years, you'll have a climax forest. We just don't have that kind of time. We really don't. And especially in the urban settings where we've, in the last year, 100 years, 150 years, that's the blink of an eye in the span of time that we've done this damage. It's like a boom, like a sledgehammer came down, we industrialized, and we changed the landscape. This is almost like a reverse sledgehammer. Like, boom, we're going to plant this forest, and we're going to plant it, and it's going to be here, all the successional layers at the same time. And we're going to give a good B12 shot in the soil. And this is what happens. The smaller trees are, that says 3-year stand of saplings. I'll show you what my 2-year sapling, my 2-year trees look like. They're up here. So this is one of my favorite illustrations because people always ask me, what is this going to look like in 20 years? And this is fairly mature Miyawaki. This is about 20 years. Here's the shrubs. Down here, some of like the birches will still be there in 20 years underneath, but the canopy trees will come up to the top layer. And this diverse vegetation is planted close together. Just like if you walked in a forest, you would see them close together. It encourages rapid growth and generates higher humidity levels that provide water to the lower levels. And this is exactly what we saw in even these small forests this past year with the drought. It was quite remarkable. So the benefit to these forests, and this is the Cambridge Miyawaki, when it was planted in 2022, in 2023, and I've gone back every year since 2022, and you couldn't see in it. You couldn't get your head in there. Now this past year, you can see through it because the canopy is starting to lift. They grow 10 times faster than a traditional forest. They're 20 times more biodiverse because we're packing them full of a diversity of plant and shrub and tree species. And they're 30 times denser. I mean, when we plant these things, traditional folks, gardeners, foresters, like, that's way too close. You can't plant them. I'm just following Dr. Miyawaki's recipe. Let's see what happens. And we really did take a risk. And I was praying that first year that this was going to work because we had 8 of them. And we got a grant from the Department of Ag to try this. They were as intrigued as we were, and they put money on the table for us to try this. But they also capture carbon. So when you do a forest like this, it's not just your traditional forest where you're doing it for lumber. This is about biodiversity, and it is also about climate smart impact. So in this face of climate change that we're dealing with, we want to capture as much carbon as possible. We want to reduce the heat in the areas. We want to capture particulate matter. We want the soils to be healthy and then increase the biodiversity. So we decided that we were going to, after all this research, I said, okay, let's write this grant and see if we get a bite. And we said, we'll do this at 7 schools. This ultimately is about the size of the grand total of forests. about 5,000 roughly native trees, and then we got the students involved. We found that the fourth graders was the sweet spot. So they were just like, they got it, and they have Chromebooks. So it's just little laptops, and they all could open their Chromebooks, and I could say to them, go pull up the iTree app. And they hear the word app, and they're like, yep, I'm on it. I found it, opened it, and in the app it puts the school location, aerial shot of the school, and then I give them the plant lists of the trees that they helped me plant the week before. They love sassafras. They just love the word sassafras, and they were just fighting over who was going to put the sassafras data in. And so the cool thing about iTree is that it allows them to understand the impact not only of this one tree, but in 5 years, how the impact gets greater. In 10 years, it gets greater. And in terms of stormwater it's capturing, in terms of the cooling of the temperature. So this one project has so many benefits that we all basically would benefit from this in the asphalt jungles that are our cities. So this is the site of the schools. They're spread all over the city. And the reason we went to the schools and didn't do city parks was because I found one person, talk about one person can change everything. There's one guy who runs the TAG program in the Bridgeport Public Schools, the Talented and Gifted programs. He was an attorney, he was a teacher, and he's retired now, and he's just like a heat-seeking missile. He knows all the administrators, all the principals, and he said, Mel, we're gonna go to all the schools. You tell me what sites are the best, but I'm gonna tell you which are the best principals and the schools that have a great teacher. And the great teacher is the one who engages the students. And he would avoid schools that he's like, nah, they're not going to get this. Let's go to this other school. And it was remarkable because it made my life so easy. I mean, we didn't have to, we'd go talk to the principal. We'd say, this is what it's going to look like. And she'd go, sure, yeah, go ahead. If we tried to do that in the city or any city or even in my town of Trumbull, it would be like an act of Congress. But they're like, yeah, that kids would love that. And I was getting ready for the question about the site issue, like site safety, like are we going to be blocking views of the school or people hiding in the bushes or people sleeping in there? And that never came up. It never came up, which amazed me. So, but it was just such a great thing to work with the schools first, and we avoided the politics of the city. And then the city came after us and said, hey, how come we're not getting any of these Miyawaki forests? I said, we'll do one with you. I'll apply for a grant. You find a good spot for me. And that's how we found the big one at Seaside Park, which is this massive, beautiful park along the Sound, but it's all grass. It's all grass. So they got jealous. So if, in Stamford, I'm sure you probably have politics that you deal with both in the schools and in the city, and you just kind of have to play it and find one person, because then I found one person in the city, young man, sustainability director, and he's helping me drive the Miyawakis into the city parks, which is great. So you just kind of have to flow like a river around all these obstacles. But this is, we took a simple formula and we started with 100 square feet. Now, the challenge was finding a landscape designer that knew how to do this, because nobody knew how to do this. So there's a company in Westchester called Planet Wild. And Planet Wild, I knew were ecological landscape designers, but I also knew they had 2 employees who were from New York City parks. So they knew urban trees. So I called them and I said, would you like to do Miyawaki forest with me? And they said, sure. I said, are there any in New York? And at that time, there were not. So we said, okay, well, we'll learn how to do this together. I wrote Planet Wild into the grant. It didn't even go out for bid. They were a partner in the grant. And they said, okay, let's start with a 100 square feet. In 100 square feet, you would have 2 canopy trees, 16 understory trees, 32 shrubs, and 100 ground cover. That's 150 plants in 100 square feet. That's dense. But that's what the formula was for Miyawaki's. And it is quite the variety of plants. So this list, I think Melanie made copies of this. It's outside on the table. This is the details of what goes into a 100 square foot Miyawaki. Now, we just planted a 12,000 square foot Miyawaki, so there were 3,000 trees and 3,000 herbaceous plants. This is 100 square feet. But look at, these are our amazing favorites of natives. And I just love how we can see the changes that are happening in spring, summer, fall, winter, when the berries come, when the birds show up because there's the fruit. And all of these, and the original Miyawaki at Cambridge, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, all of their plants also came from New England wetland plants in Massachusetts. So that's been kind of the source of a lot of the Miyawakis. When I did the schools, I decided that we needed a little bit more wow factor. So instead of smaller saplings, I got from Long Island natives 1 and 2 gallon plants. They were a little bigger, still small, but a little more mature. And they gave the wow factor after they were in the, and then they really went wow after that. So this is out there. This is this is one of the schools. This is the front entranceway, and I'll show you this. So it's 600 square feet. Each side has 300, so 100 square feet, 100 square feet, 100. So 600 times that previous shopping list. So that's a lot of plants. And so this is what it looks like. This is the very entrance to the school. Circles where the flag is, and then the school's over here. So the principal was fine with the location because it was like a major entrance to the school, and it wasn't going to be blocking anybody. So this is the aerial shots that we did on the day of planting, which was a lot of fun because we brought the 4th graders out, 2 4th grade classes, and the folks at Planet Wild, laid everything out, brought the compost in. As you can see, the compost is piled in the middle, and then as we did use the auger to make the holes, mix the compost into the holes, and then set all the plants out. And so when the kids came out, they just had to lift the plant out, which was still in the pot. Take the pot out, we had to show them how to fluff everything up and then get it in, and then we watered it. And we found actually some of the adults, the teachers, were leaving them in the pots. I'm like, no wonder your stuff's not growing. In Bridgeport, there you can't leave them in the pots. But so as you can see, these are a little bigger. These are 1 and 2 gallon pots, just because they're easier to carry, but they were a little bit more robust. So and that is it. So this is how kind of small they were. This was in 2 years ago. And then in 2025, we got some students from the Yale School of the Environment came and started measuring the height. And this is that same Miyawaki. And look at how tall these are. Here the birches are. That's 2 years. They were planted in October. This was September of 2025. Very lush, very dense, and you can see the path is starting to close up already. But this is the mosaic of biodiversity. This is the stuff that's in there. Groundsel, shining sumac, big-tooth aspen, gray alder, witch hazel, buttonbush, sweet gale. It was kind of like whatever we had. Some things were not available, like we wanted to put redbud in, and the redbud at that time wasn't available, so we found something else. But these are in there together, and they're all mixed together. And this is a photograph from one of our forests that is 18 months old. And this is, see how tight, we've got the sweet fern in the bottom right, which is a shrub, my absolute favorite. Then you've got the asters coming up, the hazelnut, you've got the cedar over here, all mixed together really tightly, really close. Amelanchier, this is biodiversity. This is a mosaic of biodiversity. They're all right next to each other. This is the illustration for one that we did. There's the red bud that we wanted, but we couldn't get. So everybody sees this and says, oh, it didn't turn pink like that. I said, no, we didn't plant them. Well, we couldn't get them, but this was really a fun one to do because it was quite large. This was the biggest one we did. It was 1,100 square feet. We called it the forest pod. And the idea came from this picture that I saw from a school in the state of Washington where they created an indigenous medicine wheel. And they planted that, and each quadrant had different seasons of concentrated natives in there. So when we went to Tisdale School, I did see that there was just a big circle of lawn, and I said, oh, we could do that. So we did. So that's the design. We did the similar design. It's a lot smaller than this one. But that was the way we did. So this is what it looked like when we first went there. It's just grass. And we came in with sod cutters and removed the grass. Actually, this park had been done by the Trust for Public Land. But they did mostly infrastructure in the park. And they had this big circle in the middle. And I said, what is that for? And they said, well, we were going to make a rolling hill. So they were going to make a hill with grass so the kids could roll down. I said, are you still going to make the rolling hill? And they said, no, we're not going to. I said, can I put a forest there? And the Parks Department in Bridgeport's like, yes, let's put a forest there. So that started the process. So removing the grass, then prepping the soil, putting the walkways in, planting everything. These are kindergartners who came out. So they're so darn cute, and we had them put the little herbaceous ones plugs in because they could fit into their hands. But it's right in the middle of their playground. So they come past this and they run through the paths every day. It's just amazing. So this was year one. Still, that first spring, things were just alive and green, and you're like, oh, this is looking really good. And then 18 months later, look at how tall they are. It's just amazing. We had a meeting in there, and people are walking through this corridor, and in less than 2 years, this is how it went. That's how fast it grows. So we put these, signs in to teach the kids. They're focused on the school ages K through 8 at Bridgeport School. So you've got kindergartners with 8th graders all mixed in one place. So we picked, elementary school age signage. So this was when I was first looking for sites. This was a site I saw from the sky, and I said, oh, there's a circle there. We could do a circle. And now I'm so excited because Google Maps, when I go to the school, it's planted, you can see it. And you can see the crisscross where the pathways are. The pathways are not green, so I don't know why that's green, because they're brown. They're just mulch. But I was just so excited to see in 2 years how, it went from lawn to forest. This was another school, the Clater School. This was the very first one we planted. It's only 100 square feet. It's 10 by 10. Again, we brought 4th graders out, planted them really tightly, really dense, and we fenced it in. So the first 2 that we planted, we fenced in just because we thought it might need to be protected. There were no deer, actually, in any of the schools. But it had a gate on both sides, and so, it's kind of like a secret garden. So let's try that. And the kids did like it because they could go in there, and it was like a secret place for them to walk through. But the fencing was very expensive. So we did the first 2 with fencing, and then we didn't use fencing anymore, and that saved us a ton of money. When you have deer, you have to fence. So my 12,000 square foot one at Seaside Park is fenced in because there's herds of deer there. So you have to do it. And it gets to a point when it's really dense, the deer won't go in because they can't get in because it's so dense. And if you put sweet fern and the smelly stuff around the outside, they don't really like that. So, but then once the canopy lifts, they can go through, but it's high enough that they won't nibble on it. So if you have to put a fence, you could do like a 2-year fence, maybe 3. The folks up in Cambridge, it was fenced for the first 2 years, and now there's no fence. So this is the same clader growth at year 2. So this is September. This is groundsel bush, which is turning into one of my favorites. It looks like it blooms. It looks like snow in September, October, but it's fuzzy. It's just fuzzy, like seed pods. And this is a traditional coastal native that loves to be in this area. We have a couple of preserves that are in salt marshes, and that's what groundsel bush grows. The leaves are very much like bayberry. That's what it looks like, and I've seen people cut it as a hedge, so it looks like a very neat thing, but then when it blooms and gets fuzzy like this, it's great. It's very fast growing, kind of like a sumac. So we didn't use traditional staghorn sumac, we used shining sumac and winged sumac, which were much more easy to manage. This one comes in, fills in really quick, gives you color and shade and interest. This was the second one we did that we fenced in as well. These were 4th graders. This is Ron. This is my important guy from the schools that was the tag teacher. So this is they all knew him, Mr. Rapice. So that was like, he was the icebreaker every place we went. And they figured if he trusted me and this team, they trusted us. And it was just so much fun planting with the 4th graders, because look, they're so small next to these trees. And then that same school in year 2 was lush. And I don't know if I have the picture. No, it's a later picture. But I did identification tags with them. And they went in there and they were lost at year 2. I mean, this was when we planted them. Look at how, this was what it looked like, these little pots. And boy, everything just like the birches. I love the birches because they just fill in and then they're beautiful and they get really tall and they begin to shade everything. But there's one of the gates. And then the Eastern red cedar, that's a tag I had made. I found a manufacturer on Etsy out in the Midwest who makes these really cool little tags. And we hung them on the trees. So I waited till obviously everything leafed out. And then I went out I would cut out pictures of like a sassafras leaf and then put the tag in the little bag and said, okay, if you find this leaf, that's sassafras that goes on here, which really helps them to do the identification with the leaves. This is just another smaller school, Thomas Hooker School, very small school, just along a plain old fence like you see at playgrounds. And this one is quite high too. This one is another small one we did, 100 square feet, 10 by 10. They had an outdoor classroom. And this was a really, really bad area of the city, but it was all gated in. And I'm like, this is perfect. They sit in this outdoor classroom and then they'll have a forest back here. So in a couple of years, they won't even see that building that's behind them. So that was on when we planted it. And this is now, at year 1, I went out and did the tagging with them. But look at how tall these things are up to there, up to here, from that to that. And they're just really beautiful, lush, and they just feel happy and healthy when you walk through there. The plants it's almost like they vibrate. I went with Dave from New England Wetland Plants last year, took him through the forests, and he agreed. He's like, it just feels good in here. And things were loaded with seeds. So he was collecting some seeds to take up to Massachusetts to propagate, so we'd have a lot more witch hazel. It's quite remarkable. This is one of our favorite schools. It looks like a prison. It's terrible. And it's bad because the glass in the windows is like fuzzy, like you can't see through the glass. So you just see these little faces at the window, like, let us out. And this is it's like concrete building, concrete courtyard, and there's a circle. I said, okay, whenever there's a circle, we're going to put a Miyawaki. So we brought the 4th graders out. And we planted the Miyawaki in the circle. And this is what, planting day, what how small the things were late 2024 and 2025. Look at how lush this is, and that's an aerial shot of what was just a circle in the middle of a concrete jungle. And what was amazing is some of the research that we've done is monitoring for birds. So we put acoustic meters in the forest and then collect later on and see what birds have shown up. And we're starting to work with Planet Wild to look at birds as the ecological marker, the marker for ecological health. So going and monitoring butterflies and pollinators is great, but it's hard and they're not always there. So if we can hear that a certain bird showed up, that bird would not be there unless it had the insects it needed. And that insects wouldn't be there unless the plants were there that it needed. So that's the marker for the middle of the food chain. And at this location, there was a species of concern that they heard. And in the report, they didn't say what it was, but they had a species of concern that showed up here in the middle of Bridgeport. It was shocking. So this is the steps as we planted. So, and this is a small one. This is about 175, maybe 200 square feet. So you just think about circles, where you could put these circles. So these mini forests are designed, specifically to mirror nature. And planting them at high density, as we wrap up, is a key technique of the method. Mirroring a forest ecosystem, when you walk through a forest, what you feel and see, the growth patterns, we're just mimicking that. The trees and shrubs compete for light, which makes them go up. They push higher and race upwards. Random planting heights allow for a balanced canopy, but they collaborate under the soil. It's a hive of activity underground in the soil. The roots, the mycorrhizal fungi, the microbes all create soil health, and the saplings support each other through the drought. And then the growth. They grow as an ecosystem, not just as a single street tree. Rather than individuals, the roots knit themselves together. And the health. They're healthy little forests because they're diverse. Imagine that. Because it's diverse, because you're mixing all of the species that need to be together, and they offer higher immunity. So if a fungus comes in or an insect, the whole thing's not going to be wiped out. I actually saw lanternflies show up, and they were sitting on the sumac. And I'm like, oh no, what are they doing? And then we just started watching them, and it was like there were no trees of heaven in the area, and the leaves kind of look the same, but they were not going to eat that or lay their eggs on it. They just kind of came through and left, which is thankful. But it just kind of faked out the spotted flies, lanternflies. The water and nutrients are drawn up and shared back and forth, and we saw this during the drought when they were helping each other. And there were a couple that didn't make it, but everything else inside was lush and green. And so when I was working with the kids outside, it was just so exciting for them to think about, like, their 4th grade. By the time they leave this school, it's 8th grade, and I guaranteed them that the trees would be over their head by the time they left. And it's getting to that point already, so we're ahead of the game. But we were outside with them, and then this is when we came inside and did iTree. So we brought it into the classroom. So the project continues in the classroom. I would recommend if you're going to do outreach into the schools, iTree is amazing, and you can do it for all different levels of ages. And the kids loved it, and then they generated little reports about their white oak or their clethra or whatever. But when I was in this classroom and I was looking out at all these kids, and it just dawned on me, I was like, this is like a Miyawaki forest, except with kids. And I was like, wow, because they collaborate, they support each other. They were helping each other with their Chromebooks and trying to find the right information to put in. They're young and small, and they start at that age, just like the Miyawaki trees that we plant. they're healthy, and all parts of this is a balanced ecosystem. It's a classroom, it's an ecosystem, it's not just one kid. And the competition, they push higher and race upwards, and they become resilient. And the diversity increases their health, and communication is a key to learning and growth. These plants are communicating, kids are communicating with each other. And for me, it just kind of dawned on me that this is like, it was just an interesting analogy that what these little forests are just like little classrooms that we see the kids working in. So the monitoring and evaluation we also did. This is a lot of fun. You can get the kids involved in it, but the big stuff like the ecosystem services, this is all being managed and monitored by this wilder ecosystem that the folks at Planet Wild are developing now. So I would recommend that if you're going to do this, you engage Planet Wild. And I actually just wrote a grant to have them come in so they can do this for some of the other Miyawakis that we planted. This was the results of the very first evaluation we did of every single school. So all schools had reports. This is the average. So the native woody species we added 21 per site. They transitioned from 30% native to 85% native. Carbon sequestration, 826 pounds a year total. That was like average. The avoided stormwater runoff. We have so much flooding when there's all this impervious surface. These forests are capturing rainwater. Temperature reduction, again, it's early because the shade isn't quite what we had hoped yet because it's still early. But the bird species on the acoustic bird monitors, we increased by 2 to 10 species per site. If you build it, they will come. The pollinator diversity there tripled. Now they were doing that by hand, so they were coming in at year 1 and 2 and monitoring the pollinators. And the native biomass increased to 85 to 95%, and the structural diversity. So we did this for every single school. And so the Department of Agriculture that gave us the grant was thrilled because this gave them the data that they just didn't have. And so it was worth every penny that they gave us for the grant. So this was the final one. These were the last slides I threw in. The Miyawaki by the Sea, 12,000 square feet. This is a Connecticut Deep grant. We started out as 2,000 square feet, and then we started making it and building it and like, oh, we have more room and I found some more money, so let's make it a little bit bigger. And I had so much money left over from the original Department of Ag grant in maintenance that I had thought we would use. We didn't use anywhere near the maintenance costs because by year 2, the weeds were all shaded out. So it truly becomes maintenance free at year 3 because it's so dense. And so I had all this maintenance money left, and I asked the Department of Ag if I could use it to make this forest bigger, and they said, yeah, sure. And imagine that, Connecticut DEP and the Department of Ag are now working together on this one Miyawaki forest. Everybody just thinks it's just so much fun. We put 3,000 trees and shrubs in there, 9 species of trees and 14 of shrubs. 3,000 herbaceous ground covers, which I got at Judge's Farm in Old Lyme. I highly recommend them. They only do herbaceous, and they're organic, they're native, and they do Eco 59, and they will propagate for you seeds, so if you have seeds. And then Harvard School of Design called us and said, Can we play in your forest? Can we measure the health of your forest? And then UMass, Yale School of the Environment, and the U.S. Forest Service. And I was with them today at the forest. We tagged every one of the 3,000 trees with ID labels and put them into a GPS. So we're mapping where they are. And then we go back and put in the species once they leaf out. And then they'll continue to monitor the growth, the health, and the canopy forever for us, for free. We didn't have to pay for any of this. This is so new here in this region that they want to really compare. So I'll show you what the aerial shot is. So this is Seaside Park in Bridgeport. So this is the parking lot. This is the location here. So we started out with a little, and then it became 12,000 square feet, because there's plenty of room. There's plenty of room. That's where the garbage to energy plant is. So when you go by on 95 and the big smoke coming out, that's where. So you see this river. This is pure industry. And right across the street is where they grind up wood and debris. And so this forest will help to capture some of the particulate matter from there. But it also is capturing runoff from the parking lot. So there's the Sound, the beach, and the parking lot. And then there are 2 storm drains in the area that we planted. So it's turning into a green infrastructure project, as they call it, because these will capture the runoff. We were there today, and the water was ponding because of the snow melt. And this is what it looked like. We put the layer of compost, and then we put the layer of wood chips on top of that before we planted. And we planted right into that, because you can't, when you put in, it's a total of 6,000 green things. Mulching around them would be really hard. So we put the wood chips on top first, and we went through. We used a group called Emerge, which are, they're a bunch of, handful of men, about 5 men who were in prison and now have been released and are trying to get training to get back into the community and learn landscaping skills. So we had 5 of them there for 3 days, and they were just wonderful because we were training them to use the auger. And so now we've got this crew of people that are trained in putting Miyawaki forests in. So every time we put one in, we can call the Emerge guys. So this was supposed to be a video. Oh, I don't know if it will work or not. It worked maybe not. But anyway, the video just shows how we're using the auger like little beehives. We drill the hole, drop the pot in, and then the Emerge guys come back in. They take them out of the pot, roll them, fluff them up, and then put them in, plant them. And so today what we were doing was going back and putting tags on each one with numbers. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So I show this, and my boss, David, goes, "Wow, we put that in too deep. Doesn't he know? Didn't you teach him how to plant?" I'm like, listen, we got 3 inches of compost, 3 inches of wood chips on top, and that's getting mixed in. So it's not, now we looked at them today, and they're all just right here because everything settled after it. But I was like, no, it was not too deep. It was not too deep. So this is what it looks like from the air. The decision from the Yale and Harvard School of Design folks was, yes, we see that your Miyawakis at the schools are spectacular, but we want to compare it to traditional planting, and we want to compare it to like maybe a quarter of that density. So when we set it up, this is the Miyawaki density, which is, that's what it looked like when it was all marked, and it's, when we started planting it, very dense. They're like a foot apart. Then we did a quarter density, and then the traditional forestry was only trees, no shrubs, no ground cover. So lined up like soldiers spread out in the field. They're going to be so unhappy, and they're really going to be jealous of their neighbors who are dense. They'll probably spread their roots to over here. We're all like where the love is going on. But I'm like, okay, if you want to compare those things, I think it's great, because then we can have cities come in and say, this is how you traditionally plant, and look at the maintenance that's involved, and they're not growing as fast. You could do a quarter of a density, but if you do the Miyawaki style, look how lush it is. Look how tall they are, look how healthy they are. And so these were 12 plots, 3 different densities. And we just randomly put them. And this is where the storm drain is, and there's a storm drain over there. So I took a lot of wetland, water-loving sedges, and we planted them all around there to capture the water before it went in. So it's pretty. It's going to look really pretty. That's the path through Tisdale now, and it's just the kids run through there, and there's all kinds of birds and stuff. So the only downside that I found, the watering has been, we didn't water other than the first time we planted, honestly. And so the watering even through the droughts was amazing. What I do find is because the schoolyards have nothing but lawn, you get a lot of blowing paper and garbage, so these collect garbage. So I have to go in and with garbage bags, or the maintenance guys can go in and collect. You'd be amazed what we find in there. You know, what is interesting to me is, you know those little nip bottles? Why do they put the caps back on them? They do. They drink them, put the caps back on because they want to be good citizens, and then they throw them into my Miyawaki forest. Why? What a strange thing people do. You know, it's like you're going to be, you know, a garbage guy, and you're going to put caps on. But that's what we find in there. We found clothes. We found a lot of strange things that didn't blow in. But that was it. They catch a lot of stuff, like floatables and blowables. We call them blowables. But that was really the only downside to them. They're very well behaved. So that's it. That's all I have for tonight. I hope I didn't run over, but I hope that you're excited to try this in Stamford. And if you need help, we'd love to come down and help you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we're going to open it up to questions. So Pam from Pollinator Pathway will come around and give you a mic to speak into.
Oh, that's the.
So
That's a
raise
mic.
your
Where's
hand,
the-
and the mic is on a little mini branch.
Yeah, in terms of soil analysis, you put an auger where I live, and you're going to need a new auger.
Oh, yes.
You know, so what's the deal there? I mean, when you've got a really rocky soil or landscape area, is there any way around that, or raise it up?
Yes,
or?
that's tough. We've been lucky that we, at the schools and at the beach, we did not have. Now I live in Trumbull, and there's buried meteors in my backyard. I can't get anything in the soil, but that's the challenge. And so this is why what we're trying to do is encourage these smaller or edge or fringe. I guess you could call them, I don't know, they're like softening the edges, because the forests that we have in our backyard, we've got our lawns, and then we've got the trees. But the piece that's missing is that transition to shrubs. And so the shrub rows are really important, and the lower canopy trees in that transition. So if you look at a side view, instead of it being, you know, mature oaks and then our lawn, that transition, ecotone transition is really what they call it. And where two ecosystems meet, that is the most vibrant place for species. That's where the birds are, because that's where the insects are. So for people's backyards, we're encouraging you to begin to think in the layers. So if you're putting layers in, you won't, you know, you're putting like 1,000 square foot Miyawaki in your backyard, but you just try the edges. You know, let's try and work on the edges, and if we can soften the edges, the biodiversity will go up in your backyard. If there's rocks there, it's going to be a challenge. I know when there's a lot of roots, even the smaller augers, it's hard to go through. You can't plant maybe as densely, and we don't want people to put soil on top of the roots either. So it's a challenging landscape in Connecticut. So we haven't faced rocks yet, but I'll let you know what happens when we do hit them. So it should be interesting. Good question.
So what are the water requirements in the beginning and ongoing for these forest projects?
That's a good question. So we surprised ourselves, actually. When the schools were planted, they were all watered, a good soaking. And then Planet Wild was supposed to come back. Now they're based in Westchester, and we're up in Bridgeport. So it was a challenge for them to come up on a regular schedule to water. So they didn't come up as much as we thought they would. As a matter of fact, they didn't, came up very occasionally. Luckily, we had like a rain this first year that we put it in. But once it got established, and even during last year, we did not water, even through the drought, which completely freaked me out because I'm like, you guys have to get up here and water. But it's so hard to water at these schools because you need to connect like 7 hoses to the school and so we got a water truck. We got a water tank to put in one of our Aspetuck trucks filled with water, and so that takes forever to get the water pressure out of it. But very minimal watering. We really just didn't. And the shocker with the big one we just did, we didn't water at all because it was dormant. So it was November, no watering. We just put them right in. We actually it snowed one day when we were planting in November. So, and these are the foresters, the U.S. Forest Service and the DEP. Forester was like, don't water, they're sleeping, don't water them. So we didn't water them, and they're all bendy, they got buds on them, they survived the winter. So the watering has been minimal. Watering will never hurt. I mean, watering will definitely help. One of the schools, the one that's the concrete prison, the maintenance guy comes out, and that's his forest. So he has been watering that one just because he took it upon himself to water it. So if you get local, get the kids to come out and water, it can only help. But personally, in these 2 years, we haven't seen that watering was an issue. And the maintenance too. The first year, the weeds will come, and we had crabgrass. We did tilling at one of the schools, and that's where the crabgrass was the worst. But I think the crabgrass, believe it or not, acted almost like a green mulch because it showed up in June, and we left it and didn't pull it out until August, and that was when the drought hit. And when we pulled it out, everything was all moist underneath. So I'm like, whoa. Well, that's interesting. Maybe we'll have to study that and see because crabgrass is an annual, so you can get it out before it goes to seed. But it was a layer. It was a green blanket. Really acted like a green blanket. I really think it did. That's what. But once we got that out and it's so shady now, we just don't have. We have to go in around the edges and get the mugwort out around the edges. But the shadier it gets, the less weeds there are. So it's interesting. Yeah.
I know you had said that the principals in Bridgeport hadn't really been concerned about sightlines, but that was always something that I wondered about as this grows. I know that the density would probably prevent people from even being able to get in. Over time, does it like thin itself out and create more openings, or does it kind of just stay a really dense mass of forest?
It does. That's a really good question, and that's why I go up to Cambridge every year to see what that one's doing. And it is definitely, not only is the canopy lifting, it's starting to thin out, and they had to thin it out themselves up there because the staghorn sumac was overpowering. Like they had just put too much sumac in there. So once they cleared some of that out, it created openings, and it helps the canopy trees, like the oaks really took off then after that. So there's always you can go in there and trim if you need to. Like the ground cell bush that I had is like closing in the pathway, so we can go in and just trim that. So you can manage it. You can leave it, or you can manage it. You can do it whatever you want. My boss just went to Tokyo, and I said, well, you have to find original Miyawaki, and he found one that was in the city, but it kind of reminded me of like the New York City pocket parks. It was a very high canopy, very in the middle of the city, but very like a Japanese garden. Like they continue to monitor it and maintain it and plant, and so it was really about creating a tranquil garden with these trees. So even in Japan, they're adapting them as they get bigger to other things. But you know, the ground covers the ground covers and the shrubs, if they're healthy, that just adds that level that you don't often see in forests in Connecticut because the deer eat that. And that's what's been so frustrating. So even if we can do a couple of these Miyawakis and fence them off to keep the deer out, you know, you'll help the birds and the insects that are really missing that lower canopy that doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.